welcome to Right On with Tom Fallwell, a bi-weekly podcast focusing on interviews, novels, reviews, and upcoming releases from indie authors. Now, here's Tom.
Hello and welcome to episode 10. This episode we have an interview with author Mary R. Woldering, and we'll be talking with her about her Voices in Crystal book series. Also, we have a couple of readings for you, one from Illusional Reality by Karina Cantus, and one from Piercing the Darkness by Aaron Michael Hall. Additionally, we have a couple of reviews for Dark Storm by M.L. Spencer and for The Lost Soul by K.S. Marsden. I'll also be announcing some up-and-coming conventions that you might be interested in attending, and a special announcement about my next book, Dragonblood Throne Legacy. So stay tuned for lots to come after a word from one of our awesome sponsors.
Are you a new indie artist looking for a way to market yourself? Maybe it's time to go indie now. Go Indie Now is an online platform that highlights, fosters, and supports indie artists of all art forms. Our shows on YouTube do everything they can to bring an audience to what you're doing. So head on over to goindienow.com, find our channel on YouTube by searching Go Indie Now, all one word, and remember, it's always time to go indie now. We'll see you there.
The following is my review of The Lost Soul by K.S. Marsden. I read this book last year and have already read the second book of the series as well. When I began reading The Lost Soul, I found the story progressing too fast, and I was concerned about not actually getting to know the characters. Considering the length of the novel, I wondered just how much detail was going to be brushed over. To my delight, things did finally slow, but they seemed at that point to slow to a crawl. The first half of the book was like that for me. Too fast, then too slow. Now, with that out of the way, I found the second half of the book far more to my liking. The pacing became more normal, the characters started coming to life, and the story is the real wonder. This is a fantastic tale, and the richness of the author's imagination really was displayed. The last quarter of the book I found extremely engrossing and suspenseful. The world building was not as rich as I prefer, but this is only the first book, so I look forward to learning even more about the world the author has created. The characters became more alive in my mind, and I came to care about them. The emotions a good story brings out really began to shine through. I admit I stumbled at times with a few sentences as an American reader of a British author, but it did not keep me from enjoying the tale. The prose was not unfamiliar, just some of the terms used in a different way than I would expect, but it did not harm the story at all. By the end of the book, I found myself wanting more, and I look forward to the next installment of the Enchenna series. There is a great story happening here, and I want to read more. I hope the author can keep the pace and detail at the level of the last part of the book, because that was ideal and fit well with her style of storytelling. I would recommend this book to fantasy readers, but don't give up early, stick with it. It gets so much better as you read. I gave The Lost Soul 4 stars, and you can find a link to the book on the podcast page. Next up, we have a book reading from Illusional Reality by Karina Cantus.
Illusional Reality by Karina Cantus. Both Kezar and Thea curled upon the sofa chatting and giggling and enjoying each other's company. It was late in the afternoon when the conversation took on a serious note. "I do not feel it prudent to disregard Coven's hand of friendship," Kezar declared. "Ought I to progress when he summons, then?" "With the death of Darthorn, we exist in the belief that the threat has elapsed, that we retain peace." "Why do you imagine this?" Thea asked. "Covan has not displayed a regard to desire or control to Cinia. Why fear him? Where are the signs of want? He is not similar to Darthorn. He has not raised his hand against us. I believe it is prudent to accept his attempt of peace. I request pardon if I remark out of turn." Nonsense, Khazar. 'Tis good you voice your thoughts, though you are very mistaken. Have you not forgotten 'tis remarked the hand of Kovon slew our rulers? I have encountered him, and I have sighted for myself the evil heart. I am convinced you have further to fear than ever, and it frightens me to realize your thoughts. Certainly we have peace at the moment, yet for what duration? Believe me, Khazar, the battle is just commencing. If that is so, then 'tis prudent to grasp the hand that Kovon extends. Thaya did not want to continue the discussion, and so conceded. Possibly I am rash in my judgment, and I will allow more reflection. Many have not sighted Kovon. I am one. I gather information about him in passing. I desire to become familiar, Thaya. How does he sight? Khazar asked bashfully. With what you have perceived. How do you vision him? Thaya teased. Khazar thought hard for a moment. I vision a handsome sex, black hair similar to his father, young, almost representative of coming of age, gentle and obedient to his peers. Thaya laughed. He is indeed handsome, though his eyes are cold, and I am doubtful of his obedience. I believe he respects none other than himself. As for sighting young, in youth he does, though his face reveals signs of a bitter existence. However, he does retain a delicious smile, and I believe he has not dilemmas when it comes to companionship. They blushed and then collapsed into a fit of giggles. Jekar stood nearby, unseen. He smiled to himself at the thought of telling Kovon what he had heard. It seemed disappointing to harm a Bora, especially one as beautiful as Thaya. Jekar was certain she would have satisfied Kovon. Now it looked as though she was changing her mind. She might even call upon him. Even so, orders were orders, and of course he wanted to satisfy his new master. Neither women saw the bottle appearing out of nowhere. They were far too busy laughing to notice the green liquid being poured into the wine pitcher. Khazar was more to Jekar's taste, young and innocent. Perhaps Kovon would reward her to him after he gained control of Ticinia. It would be a shame to vision the beauty in chains. Jekar was certain that Kovon would not decline a small request from a loyal servant. Before long, Thaya stood up and walked over to the pitcher. Jekar watched in anticipation as she poured herself a chalice of wine. Words were exchanged, and then, to his horror, Khazar took it from her and drank the poison with relish. Within seconds a cup fell from Khazar's hand. She grabbed at her throat, her eyes widening in horror. The last thing Jekar saw before he fled was Thaya catching Khazar's dead body. Her screams rang through the recess and beyond. The frightened servants rushed into the attendance room to see Thaya cradling Khazar. "Summon for Valken!" she cried. Only there was no need. Thaya had alerted most of the city, and Valken was soon by her side. "Khazar is beyond my aid," he announced. "What? Can you not deliver her back to me?" Thaya cried. "What requirement is your gift?" "Her breath was forfeited before my arrival. I cannot recover a soul," Valken answered. Thaya bowed her head in shame at her words. Omad and Alcazar arrived. Shocked by the sight in front of them, Alcazar ran to Thaya's side and held her while she wept. "What has occurred?" Omad asked. "We were enjoying each other's company when she collapsed to the floor," Thaya sobbed. "For what reason did this occur?" Omad questioned. "Khazar was healthy, was she not?" He looked to Valken for confirmation. "'Tis not a natural death," he said. "The wine!" Thaya jumped up to her feet. "She consumed the wine before she collapsed." Valken looked for the cup, which he found a short distance away from Khazar's body. He sniffed it. His expression was solemn. "'Tis how I feared. Skrikla." Squiggler, what is that? Thaya asked as she wiped her eyes. 'Tis a rare poison, originating from the outlands, Falcon answered. Whoever poisoned this wine went to great efforts in the creation of this potion. But it is I that ought to have consumed the wine, Thaya explained. I poured it, only Kaiser seized it from me. It is I that ought to be lying there present. Nay, it is not, Omad announced sternly. Kaiser sacrificed her existence for the sake of yours. Alcazar, protect our lady well, for I fear there is a traitor in our midst. My lady, you are not to drink or eat of anything unless I permit it. Do you understand? I will not permit a fellow Ticinian to taste of my food prior to myself. Nay, my lady, nor I, Falcon agreed. I am acquainted with the scent of poison. If your refreshments have been tampered with, I will hold awareness. Depart now with Alcazar. Remain in the Torah for my return, for I deem you will require my aid. Alcazar escorted Thaya away from the tragic scene. In the past, Alcazar had taught Thaya how to meditate, and by the time Falcon returned to the Torah, he was surprised to find Thaya well and coherent. Thaya talked openly about her fears. If only I had approved the encounter with Kovon, now 'twould have occurred. 'Tis I that caused the death of my friend. Nay, my lady, Falcon objected. 'Tis prudent that you do not venture to Senks, for I am secure in my thoughts that you will not be with us present. Why did the council not heed our lady's concerns? Alcazar asked him. If they had treated your belief earnestly, we would have been more aware. They could have prevented Khazar's death. I disagree with you both, Falcon protested. There is now to place blame, other than Kovon. Silence followed. Alcazar was then asked to leave so Thaya could rest. She finally settled to sleep, but was troubled by the thought of what light would bring. That was Illusional Reality, narrated by Karina Gantus, and you can find Illusional Reality in paperback and ebook on Amazon.
July is a month filled with conventions all over the eastern half of the United States. There are so many it was not possible to relate them all in this show, but I've added a link to a PDF file on the podcast page so you can review them all and click the links to those you find of interest. For Facebook events, there are a few you might find to your liking. First up is International Authors Day on Friday, July 14th at 12 a.m. EDT. On Saturday, July 15th, is the Battleborn release party that celebrates the release of Joshua Chad's new book, and that begins at 9 a.m. Mountain Daylight Time. Both of those events are on Facebook, and you can simply search for the title International Authors Day or Battleborn Release Party to find them. We have with us today author Mary Woldering, and we're going to be talking with her about a series she has written called Children of Stone. And I think you fantasy fans out there will find this interesting. So let me first introduce you to Mary R. Woldering, and if you will just tell us a little about yourself, Mary.
Okay. My name is Mary R. Woldering, as Mr. Fallwell has said, and I'm I guess, late to the party type of writer. I've written all my life, but I didn't really publish anything until I was 65. It was my present to myself. And at this point, I have self-published 3 of a proposed 5-book series called Children of Stone. I'm hard at work on the 4th book. I'm retired. I'm married. I have 2 grown children and 3 grandchildren. Both live far away. And so this is what I do. I just write and try to sell what I've written and try to meet people in the writing world.
Well, I think For those out there, I'm up in age too, and I think us with experience make better writers myself. But we'll see how that goes.
Right.
What is it made you decide to become a indie author, to get into the self-publishing?
Well, when I did some, back in the 1980s, when I was just a young mother, I tried to do the traditional route and got my rejection slips, and they kept coming back, and it just seemed like in those days you didn't have the option of emailing or sending a download to anyone. You had to have the whole thing printed out and send a box, and then send the box for them to ship it back to you. And I went through this about 4 times. I tried to make some connections, but then I realized I just didn't have time to do this and to raise my children too. So I kind of put it away and thought, well, maybe one day I would do it. And when I came back at it, mostly through my daughter saying, "Mom, are you ever going to publish those?" I said, well, I'll look into it. And then I saw that they had, I think a friend told me that there was now independent publishing, and that you could just kind of pay it. They gave me Create Space's number, and I called them and I said, well, hey, I'll do it. So okay. I got a manuscript ready and sent it to them. And that was that. I realized it was expensive, so I started trying to cut costs by having family members look at it and kind of edit it a little bit. And then I published I'd say in about a year after that, I came out with the ebook and book 2. And 17 months after that, I produced book 3. Mm-hmm. And that's about how it's been. I joined a writers group after I had done the first one, and they've helped my writing tighten up quite a bit. So that actually when people read the 3, they say that each book gets better.
Yeah, I know what you mean there.
So now I'm kind of looking at doing a few minor, not story changes, but some tightening up of the first one at some point.
Mm-hmm. Would you call these fantasy or science fiction or a little of both?
It's multi-genre, and I've kind of run the gamut over what it was called. I didn't know really that much about genre. When I started, I just wrote a story I had and then said, well, let me figure out what genre is that. Of all things, I first started to put it in historical, but the people in historical said, oh, well, this is not accurate. It's got too much fantasy, too much stuff that isn't real in it. Then I kind of drifted over to romance because it did have kind of very strong love story in it. But it wasn't what I thought was romance and what is selling as romance aren't the same thing anymore. It had its science fiction elements, and it also had its fantasy elements, because it did sort of fit epic fantasy, except that it really wasn't dragon slayers and stuff like that. It was kind of a different take on mythology. The premise was, way back when I was in college, I started looking at early mythology early human mythology, and realized that the stories of the gods and goddesses, well, they weren't like gods or goddesses. They just seemed to me to be like superheroes. And so I thought, maybe suppose I could start with something to where they were started out as ordinary people, and then something happened and they became superheroes. And So that's how the story came about. I did put some science fiction in it because they got boosted along by some very unusual alien life forms. Mm-hmm. They could only manifest in our dimension or universe, as you would call it, is in the shape of stones. So they were like small gemstones, kind of the stones you might find in, say, an indoor planting or something. I call them melted marbles, Yeah. But then they were more than that. They were something sort of like a jump drive, because they would seek out a human host telepathically and enter into their foreheads, and then they would start rewriting their DNA. So I'm guessing it's really kind of a combination of science fiction and fantasy. Yeah. There's that button. I knew. Okay. It's a junk call.
Okay. That's all right. I can edit that out. In the series, you're calling Children of Stone, so you explain what they are. Is there many main characters through these books, or just one?
There is a group. It starts out with one main character who's essentially, I guess you would say, he's chronically depressed, and he's a hermit. Okay. He believes he's living under a curse because his wife had died 15 years earlier, and so he just kind of became a hermit and lived around the edges of stuff, and has this worship of a goddess that the time period, incidentally, is a little important, because this is actually before the days of Abraham. So this is ancient Egypt and ancient Middle East. And the goddess that he worships is Asherah, which I guess later on became something like Ishtar. Okay. And it's kind of a fertility. She's a fertility goddess, but also a warrior goddess. And so he sings praises to her all the time, and has such a beautiful voice that's what evidently attracted the attention of these beings. So they come and they say, will you help us? We need a host, essentially. And he didn't know what that meant, because he was not educated. And so, okay. Basically he's saying, will it get me closer to the goddess and get this curse lifted from me? Right. And so they're going, sure, yes, it'll do that. But then they turn him into something that is bigger, taller, stronger, and much better looking, and semi-immortal by the time they're finished with him. But one thing that they don't change is they don't change your basic nature. Mm-hmm. And he had been a caring shepherd at one point, and he can't stand things that are being hurt or that he views as helpless. And so that becomes his motive. He goes back to his home and finds out that thieves are there, and they have these three women that they have been trafficking. So this is one reason it kind of gets that 16+ rating, because although it's not, it's a subject that maybe some younger teens might find difficult. Yeah. And so he goes, these women are basically at the end of their rope after he gets them free of the thieves. And so he goes, well, hey, maybe they can do for you maybe a little bit of what they did for me. And so that's how his group starts forming, because the women are transformed too.
So the whole series is about this group that forms, basically?
This group that forms, and also the people that are trying. They're told to go essentially to ancient Egypt and hand over this box of these stones to the priests because there are other artifacts that they belong with that have been kept secret. And so, and they said, in return, you're going to have these new bodies and you're going to be much more useful to people. And so they take them. However, enter the villains. The villains want them now. They want these people gone. They want to use them for their, I guess, nasty little purposes, essentially to keep themselves in power. Mm-hmm. So the conflict. And so the series goes through their adventures and their character development and how their lives actually do change.
Mm-hmm. And you got 2 more books coming up in this, you said?
Yes, I do. And if it goes well, I've got ideas for a few spin-offs. Okay. I've got a little bit of time travel I could throw into it. Break out a couple of characters and then put them in different eras. I've thought of that. Mm-hmm. There's what I discovered when I was doing the ancient Egyptian gods and Middle Eastern gods is they're not so different than the Greek gods. So I'm going, well, what if they went to the Greek islands and pretty much became viewed as the Greek gods? So then that changes.
Okay.
So it's sci-fi based twisted mythology, is I guess what you could call it.
Well, it sounds like a lot. How large? Let's see. How large are the books? Are they? They're pretty good size.
They're running about I'd say 400 pages each.
Yeah.
So it's not a quick read.
Yeah.
And I've actually got them printed fairly large. Well, I mean, not large print, not your quote unquote large print.
Yeah.
But I went with in the print copies, I went with the 7x10.
Okay.
And it's still an inch thick, rather than your little Walmart size paperback.
Yeah.
But they're all available on ebook as well. I'd been contemplating audiobook, and I have actually been talking with Aaron Michael about it, but that's still in the very early planning stages because I've had a lot of people tell me it should be an audiobook, but I don't know exactly what that ends up. Because I've been told it's like an audiobook because I have a whole lot of poetry in it, and poetry and blind verse, open verse.
Yeah.
When the aliens are speaking, they speak in verse.
Okay.
And so that's how you can tell the difference between people speaking or the children of stone speaking, mm-hmm. and or people singing. And so everybody's going, it should be an audiobook. And I'm going, a 400-page audiobook is not going to be cheap. I mean, not only it would be expensive to produce. I think your average person, if they're squealing at a $2.99 ebook, are going to really start to squeal at an audiobook.
Well, that depends. Some people prefer to listen to audio, and some people prefer to read. So
most people don't have time to read them.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But some people do prefer to listen, and they can actually listen while doing other things. Now, I'm not one of those. I can't. I'd rather read it because I can only focus on one thing at a time. So.
I was not really much of a reader when I started this venture because I was just busy. But I gravitate toward ebooks because I'm trying to keep myself physically fit as I age. So I take the e-reader to the gym and look at it while I'm on the elliptical or on the walking track. Mm-hmm. And that's how I can get reading done.
So How have you found the indie author community helpful to you?
Pretty much. I think it's getting better, but that's mostly because I'm finally settling on a genre.
Yeah.
I had a good friend who was a paranormal romance author, but they market their books in an entirely different way.
Yeah.
I mean, for them, just essentially robo ads and 99-cent specials are what seem to work for them.
Yeah.
And whereas people in the sci-fi fantasy community seem to work through more of a network.
Yeah. Have you planned any live appearances, book signings, or anything?
I do those. I take a bunch of books wherever I go to someplace public.
Mm-hmm.
I actually had from about 2 years ago a YouTube video of myself giving a speech to a group of people about the pros and cons of indie publishing.
Yeah.
It was before my third book came out. And my son is there helping me out. He's been kind enough to be an unprofessional editor, I'll say, of my second and third book. That's because he's an unpublished writer himself.
Yeah.
And so he said, well, I'll edit it for you. And so he's learning more about editing. He also did the formatting for my ebooks.
Yeah.
So that took the price down a little bit.
Well, looking at your books, I was noticing the covers are really nice. Did you get a cover designer, or how did you go about getting your?
That was CreateSpace. When I got book one done, I sent them a whole bunch of still pictures and drawings. I actually was an art historian and did have a very old degree in fine arts, but I never kept it up. So my drawing skill is kind of like, you don't practice something, it goes away.
Nice. They look pretty nice, and they're nice and original too. You don't, a lot of people use stock images. These look really original and seem to fit what you're writing to me.
And I also didn't really like what I saw in a lot of the sci-fi fantasy stuff. It's basically some guy on a sword and a dragon.
Yeah.
I'm like going, okay, well, I can't do a dragon for you. Or some guy and a spaceship. And the romance is worse. You get a torso. So I really decided that if I couldn't get my characters depicted accurately, I didn't want to have characters on the cover.
Yeah.
So I think that's what sets mine apart, is that I don't have figures. I did with the third one, I did go with a pyramid because people were saying, there's nothing that says Egypt about this. And I can't, all right, I guess I'll do a pyramid for the third one. But, so I went with that one. And it took quite a few phone calls with the artist group from CreateSpace.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're very specific with what you want, it doesn't cost you an arm and leg. The only problem is you have to work with them and you have to be pretty firm with it. They give you two choices, and sometimes neither of them work, but I was fairly lucky in that respect. I kept thinking, well, I've got to go with the cheaper one because they're very expensive for covers.
Yeah.
I mean, most of their cost at this point is the cover and the lettering, because I know that if I went with, say, an independent artist, I could probably have it done for about 1/4 that amount. But I'd rather have something that reaches and grabs somebody than, and, you know, and plus now that I've got a series going, I want, say, the 4th book to sort of look like it's in the same group as the others.
Yeah, you've got that going. I mean, you can tell that they're all related to each other by the lettering and the way the names put on there and everything, your author name. It really looks nice, and I think you've done a good job there getting that done that way. Well, we're going to run out of time, so I'm going to have to cut it short. 30 minutes don't take long. But I'm going to have I'll have a link to you and to your Amazon author page and to your each of your books on our podcast page. We'll have that set up when your interview comes up, and so we'll be sure and promote you as best we can with our podcast. And I just want to thank you for appearing on the show. And do you have any last words you would like to say to anybody?
Well, I hope that I hope my little chat today has interested some people in picking it up. I do have a blog and an author page too, and I'm very accessible. You know, if anybody wants to ask me anything about my books, please do so. That's all I can say.
Okay, well, very good. Thank you, Mary, for being with us. And I look forward to reading your books. I actually am planning on it. They're on my list, but I got such a long list. I don't know when I'll get to them. But
I know what you mean. I've got one of those lists myself.
But thank you for being with us, and we're very happy to have you on the show today.
Okay, and thank you.
C.G. Blade's pseudoverse novels are a sarcastic look into mankind's race to develop the first conscious artificial intelligence and achieve singularity. The problem is that most of the runners in this race are sadistic, hell-bent on destruction of DNA as we know it, and have a fondness for those missing a Y chromosome. Why, you ask? From cobalt to crimson to emerald, this is one wild, mysterious roller coaster ride as a hidden puppet master is slowly but surely gaining ground on humankind. C.G.'s newest novel, Onyx, goes back 26 years before Cobalt and explains the beginning of it all. Will humanity finally become steady? Tropa is all around us now as heliotrope starts to take shape. We hope you enjoy this little slice of science fiction heaven which fuses historical science fiction, satire, horror, and plenty of hidden Easter eggs along the way. Join us in liberating the pseudos from Pseudosynth Press Publishing. July is a month filled with conventions all over the eastern half of the United States. There are so many it was not possible to relate them all in this show, but I've added a link to a PDF file on the podcast page so you can review them all and click the links to those you find of interest. For Facebook events, there are a few you might find to your liking. First up is International Authors Day on Friday, July 14th at 12 a.m. EDT. On Saturday, July 15th, is the Battleborn release party that celebrates the release of Joshua Chad's new book, and that begins at 9 a.m. Mountain Daylight Time. Both of those events are on Facebook, and you can simply search for the title International Authors Day or Battleborn Release Party to find them. Now I have a book reading for you from Piercing the Darkness by Erin Michael Hall. This is the 3rd book of her awesome The Rise of Nazil series.
The Ohor knelt on the ground, sifting through the loose dirt that lay there. After raising a finger to its mouth, the men noticed the illumination beneath its hood. A hand reached up, sliding the heavy cowl from its head. Tehran had not expected the Ohor to be female. In all the occurrences penned, only males bore this mark. The Ohor's head was shaved on both sides, with the glyphs extending from the crest on her forehead down her cheeks and on each side of her head. Her straight black hair was fastened with mirror-stones hanging from its end. When she peered up at them, he noticed one eye was emerald and the other crimson. The glyphs flashed, causing her honeyed skin to shimmer. The Ohor's frame gave little hint to the power they knew she possessed. To most, she would look like nothing more than a young girl. The Kionzi and the Uzan knew her to be as aged as the wood itself. "You are Ohor," Turan finally said.
Are we not all Ohor, Uzan? This is who we are. It is who we have always been.
She struck the ground with her staff, causing a wave of energy to surge beneath their feet. Thick vines erupted all about them, entangling their ankles.
Do you fear me, Kionzi?
"I do not fear you, Sierra Vohor. You are no threat to these lands or those who inhabit it."
You know this? The ones before you have feared, and with good cause. Do you think yourself superior?
Avix did not flinch. "It was not fear, Ohor. We recognize your importance and your power. The Ohor do not destroy. You are no enemy to the Guardians or those of Afaria."
And what of you, Uzan? Malachi has shielded the threshold, and we cannot pass.
The vines crept further up their legs as she glided closer. "Droku Malachi does not fear you. He understands your nature, as do I. He will not allow the disruption. You offer nothing to aid in this, and there is much to prepare." A grin creased her lips.
It is more than you know.
Ohor placed a hand on the tree nearest her. Her eyes closed as the glyphs pulsed.
The effects of this shift penetrate all about us. This wood is ancient and wise, as the seven you now worship. You do not know, because you do not hear. It is called out to us.
"Then you know what is to come?" Avix asked.
Indeed, conduit of the Guardians, as do you. Albeit, you know only what your paltry intellect can comprehend. It is there, yet you do not see.
She said, noticing subtle movement in the distance.
The cries of the wood ring loudly in our ears. Unlike those of these lands, they are pure and uncorrupted.
"Not all in the lands are as such," Avik said as the vines crept further up his torso. "The Guardians work to protect those of these lands as you stay far removed from it."
These lands are all that concern the Ohor. Those poisoning it are not.
Ohor raised her palm toward the men, causing the intricate glyphs to glow. When Avix's eyes glimmered, she shifted, sending a burst of energy behind them, ensnaring Shintayo and Zal.
Those of Xiandru are powerful, but more will be needed. This darkness will not be allowed to penetrate the purity of that we protect. Your guardians grow weak as they remain here in aid to inferior beings. Their children have returned, and so should they, to the spirit realm. The encasements they inhabit obscure all that they are, what they have always been. More sacrifices of the Atharians will be necessary to sustain them. They are spirit and energy, and cannot remain. Their essence dwells within all things, and must be set free. You do more harm by not releasing them to the spirit realm. The lives of those in the land do not compare to that of the spirits.
The Guardians will return to their home as they always have. Unlike the Ohor, they will not leave us to this fate.
If the darkness is summoned, we will return.
Already Masak inhabits one of these lands. The darkness surrounds us. Ohor replaced her cowl as the vines encircled the necks of the two men.
There are darker entities of the realms attempting to conquer these lands. Conduit. Already the passage has been breached. Your guardian should commune with the trees about them and learn of it.
As one, they would see. Separate, the connection lessens. The realms are no longer aligned. You feel the imbalance, yet you do not understand. It is not only Sanctium where the threat lives, but it is also in the Shadowkin and beyond.
As Avix attempted to speak, the vines tightened around his throat, cutting off his words. The Ohor wrapped her staff to the ground and exposed the glyphs on her arm. She raised a hand, placing it on the ancient tree. With a flash of light, the large trunk appeared to shift, with waves of energy emanating from within.
This is only the beginning,
Ohor warned before stepping through the disruption.
I have another review for you. This one is from Darkstorm by M.L. Spencer. Darkstorm is the first book in her amazing The Ren Wars saga.
Darkstorm by M.L. Spencer is an exceptionally well-written fantasy epic with dark undertones. Spencer weaves a compelling tale of intrigue, sacrifice, betrayal, and love, all enveloped in a magical world on the fringe of war and disaster. When a powerful secret order is discovered plotting the morally unthinkable, can a few conflicted and emotionally scarred characters intervene in time to prevent an apocalyptic event that would change the very fabric of their existence? The perfidious depths that some might sink when confronted with their own mortality is hauntingly brought forth within these pages. Darkstorm encompasses strong themes and multidimensional characters. Of them, the irrepressibly scarred Quinn is my favorite. I found myself rooting for him in some chapters and scolding him in others. With the rich cast of characters, each flawed, yet each reaching within their depths to accomplish a common goal, Darkstorm will keep you engrossed in a fast-moving and sometimes jaw-dropping plot. M.L. Spencer's imaginative musings are to be applauded. I cannot wait until the next novel in the series. Highly recommended. For more fantasy, sci-fan, and sci-fi reviews, visit angelicmusings.org.
Hello, I'm Kay Gantus from Author Assist. I'm a freelance writer and author of 8 books and over 35 publications. I have been in this business for over 25 years and I'm proud to call myself an indie author. However, being independent comes with a lot of responsibilities that take time, skill and experience, all of which I have, and for this reason I now offer my time and experience to other indie authors. My services include, but are not limited to, virtual assistance, social media consultancy, marketing and promotional management, blog tours, event and party hosting, setting up and the promotion of Head Talker and Thunderclap campaigns, branding, logo design, narration, book trailers, newsletter and sign-ups, bookmark design, teaser and banner design packages. All permanent positions and services come with regular updates via video meetings or phone calls. Even when our arrangement has ended, I'm always around to give advice and answer any questions that the author has. If any of these services interest you and you'd like to discuss them further, then please get in touch with me via Facebook at Kgantus Author Assist or email kgantusauthораssist@gmail.com. Samples and testimonials are available on request. I look forward to chatting with you.
My next book, Dragonblood Throne Legacy, is now in the final editing stages, and I am officially announcing a release date of August 5th, 2017 for the book. This will be the first book of a planned 2-book series, but is a complete story in itself. This is actually a total rewrite of my very first attempt at a novel, Dragon Rising. I've learned so much these past few years, and I'm still learning, but I feel I have developed my own style of storytelling and wanted to do that first one over again. I think the results are a far better novel than I had originally written. You can keep up with the latest developments on my Dragonblood Throne Facebook page. You'll find a link on the podcast page, and I hope you will come by and give me a like and keep an eye out for the release. That's all we have for today. I hope you enjoyed the show, and remember, you can find a link on the podcast page to the books reviewed or with readings as well as links to Mary R. Woldering's author page on Amazon and a link to each of her books. We hope you will join us again in 2 weeks for the next exciting episode of Right On with Tom Fallwell.